Welcome everyone! In this video I'm going to show you how I moved the receptacle that lined up with the vertical board during an accident while I was installing. But this project took a turn once I removed the electrical box. I quickly see the concrete block was knocked out to accept the depth of the box on this outer wall. And once I cut out the drywall for its new location and removed the insulation, you can see there's not much room for a new box to be installed. Now at first I was considering hammer drilling the block out perimeter with a masonry bit, then using my air hammer with a chisel to make a new hole in the block. But instead you'll watch me come up with a less destructive solution and with a little magic, move the receptacle over. So if you want to see how I pull it all off, stay tuned because this one was a real challenge and you don't want to miss it. So I couldn't figure out a layout that I liked without this board covering this receptacle. So I got to decide what to do with this receptacle. It's to the left of this stud here and the electrical box is attached to it. But my piece of wood coming right directly over it, as you saw. So I was debating whether to put a 3-gang electrical box here and put this inside there. I kind of want to do a double one because you see what I did over here? I put one of those receptacles that has a USB and a USB-C, and her bed goes here and her nightstand goes right here covering this. So whenever I'm doing a project like this, I like to upgrade. So I want to probably put, I don't feel like messing with this, so I'm going to probably put a double gang box over here and then bring the wires over. I'm hoping that the wire is big enough and maybe I can pull off a staple and get it in there and then I can see what happens. These kind of things, until I start getting into it, I don't know which way it's going to go. I of course start by turning the power off at the breaker, verifying with the help from my watch, then my receptacle tester. Next I need to disconnect and remove the current receptacle because I need to remove this electrical receptacle box to gain access to the wires. Now the reason why you're seeing 2 sets of wires attached to this receptacle is because half of it has a constant hot and the other half has a switched hot for a nightstand light. You'll understand this more as you watch the rest of the video, and I will explain in detail how this is achieved. You see me now disconnecting the ground wire that's attached to the green screw. During the process of disconnecting all the wires, I noticed the red hot switch wire that comes from the light switch broke off. So that was never connected properly, and one of the reasons why I don't like using the back pressure lock terminals. So I finish up disconnecting all the wires that were attached to the screw terminals. Now these last 3 wires are installed in the back pressure lock terminals. They were pushed in, and the only way to release them is to use a real small screwdriver, and there's a slot next to the wire so that you can insert the small screwdriver in and push down as you pull the wire to release them. But it was becoming an unnecessary battle because I had plenty of wire length, and I just decided to cut them off with my diagonal cutting pliers. Now that the receptacle is disconnected, I need to untwist and straighten up all the wires. I remove a wire nut and a pigtail wire that was used for the ground. I need the wires straightened up so that they pull through the electrical box easier when I cut it and remove it. You're going to see me do that in a bit. Let me show you a close-up of what's going on in this receptacle electrical box. These wires coming from the top is what's bringing the power into this box, with the black wire is a constant hot and the red wire is a switched hot. These bottom wires run through the wall behind the drywall to this receptacle on this wall, and with the incoming power coming from these top wires, the red wire turns on and off a nightstand lamp from a light switch located by the bedroom door behind me. Now check this out. I removed the phone jack wall plate, and because this wall is an outside structural wall, the block is right there. They just attach a small strip of wood between the block and the drywall to have something to secure the drywall to. Now look how deep this box is. Let's remove it and you'll see why. I start by using a pry bar to reveal the metal bracket used to attach the box to a stud so I can cut it right along here. I use my oscillating multi-tool with a carbide blade. I started with a used worn out blade, but once I switched out to the carbide blade it cut right through easily. I barely had to push it as I was cutting right through the metal bracket. This is the easiest way to do this. I use my oscillating multi-tool all the time during my home DIY projects. Then I use my pliers because it's now hot to pull it out. Here's a shot how it looks. Next I use my small pry bar to move the box over because there's another tab on the box I need to cut off. It's plastic so it cuts off super easy. So I use my oscillating multi-tool again and make quick work of it. Next I use my pliers to pull the box out. Whoever installed this box damaged the integral clamp so I don't need to pry those up to release the wires, and it pulls out pretty easy. Here's a shot of it out. It gets pretty beat up during removal and cannot be reused. Now because this wall is an outer perimeter wall, check out how they knocked out the block to accept the box depth. And I never seen this before, but I stick my old iPod Touch in the hole and see how they run the wire through the block to get to the back of the box. And here's a shot of the second wire that's coming from the light switch box from the attic through the block. Let me show you what it looks like in a diagram. So the gray is the block wall, and the green represents the drywall. See how the wire goes through the block to get to the back of the electrical box? I need to pull those wires back out of the block wall. Check out this expandable foam they use to insulate and seal the gaps. My first step is I need to remove it to be able to pull the wires out. Here's a shot again inside the wall so you can see how the expandable foam is securing the wire in the hole and why I need to remove it. So I fast forward this part more than normal because it was a long, tedious process to pick away the foam in my way. I used my pry bar for everything I could reach around the drywall cutout. Then reach in the wall to pull out as much foam as possible that dropped from the inside bottom of the wall. I even used my fish rod to stab at the foam where it was securing the wire as it went into the block. Here's a shot so you can see how I broke it off the wire. Now it's free to be pulled through. I next draw some pencil lines exactly where my accent wall vertical board lands on the wall. This will help me determine and visualize where I need to cut the new cutout. And I'm hoping once I pull this wire out of the block wall, it will be long enough to reach the new location for the receptacle box. You're going to see soon how I pull it out of the block. But this is a nice shot so you can see what I'm dealing with. So this is what I'm going to use. These gangable rectangle steel switch boxes. Let me show you how I construct this and what my idea is. Because the wall's so shallow, I'm going to use 2 of these boxes, one to hold the receptacle, the other side just to contain the wires. Because these are gangable, they are designed so that you can remove the 2 opposing sides of the box and connect them together to hold 2 or more devices. As you can see, it's really easy to do, and after screwing back the same 2 screws that held the sidewall metal pieces, they are connected together. Now check this out, comparing a regular size 2-gang PVC old work electrical box with the rectangular steel box, you see the size difference. Also, I consider this PVC shallow electrical box. It has a side panel which allows for extra wiring room and accommodates shallow walls. But its depth of 2 inches wouldn't work for my application. The steel box has a depth of just 1.5 inches. So that's why I decided to use it like I mentioned, with one side to hold the receptacle, the other side just to contain the wires. Now this steel box has these plaster ears which allow it to be used in old work applications. They can be removed by unscrewing these screws, which you'll see me do soon because I just decide to attach the box directly to the wall. Okay, the next step is to cut the drywall cutout for the new box. I use my level to mark level lines equal to the top and bottom of the original receptacle electrical box cutout. Then mark around the new box centered in those lines. I go back tracing over those lines, darkening them up with the box out of the way. Next, I use my oscillating multi-tool to cut along those pencil lines. Normally I would use my drywall jab saw, but because the block wall is so close to the drywall, it would be hard to work the saw blade in and out of the wall cavity without hitting that block wall. The oscillating multi-tool is more precise in this tight space. I screw in a drywall screw in the middle of my cutout as a handle, then finish the last cut holding onto the screw so the drywall piece doesn't fall in the wall. Next, I remove the insulation by simply picking it out and making sure it won't get in my way. Since I have to bring the wire over to the new cutout, I make sure its path is clear too, picking all the paper out of the way from one cutout to the other. Let me show you what I'm going to use to help me pull the wire out of the block wall. I had an extra lift rod for a faucet, and I bend and loop the end around to the shape of a hook. And the other end has a knob to help me have something to grip when I pull. So I could have never done this without my iPod Touch giving me a view inside the wall. I hooked the wire between the block wall and the drywall. Here's a wider shot, and with my hand in the hole in the block, I push the wire at the same time as I pull on the rod. You can't just pull up on the wire, it won't just pull it through. You have to push on the wire as you pull. I'm going to speed this up, but still show you the battle. I just keep pulling on my rod and pushing the wire through the block. I know what you're thinking right now. No way I would try all this just to move a receptacle, but I was in too deep to stop now. Here's a shot when I pulled the last part of the wire through the block. Guys, I could have never done this without my makeshift rod with a hook. I also was hoping the wire didn't get damaged as it was getting pulled through the block. Okay, now that the bottom wires are pulled from the block, I have to repeat everything I just did for the top wire. Here's a nice shot. They're coming from the attic and then through the block. So I again take my rod and hook the wire between the block and the drywall so I can pull down on it as I push the wire through the block. Then I change my position, and you can see me pulling the rod with my left hand while pushing the wire with my right hand. I just keep working it through the block little by little. The top wire was easier than the bottom wire because it was easier to pull down than up. I take a look to see how far I got it, and I just need to pull the wires that are out of the jacket through. So I rehook my rod back on, get back into a better position, and I give it one last pull and push, and I get the second wire through the block. I was so happy to successfully pull that off, and I can see I have plenty of wire length. to reach my new receptacle box location. I try my fit and I need to clean up my cutout, so I use my oscillating multi-tool to enlarge all the sides. If you guys are liking this video, please hit like and consider subscribing to see more home DIY projects like this one and to help my channel grow. So I finish this up and try it one more time. And it fits now. I just need to remove these plaster ears. So back at my workbench, I go ahead and unscrew all the screws holding them on. Next, I knock out the knockouts. I just take my Phillips screwdriver and give them a whack, and then take my pliers and give them a wiggle and they break away. It's literally that easy. And like I mentioned, I'm only using one side of the box to contain the wires, so that's why I'm only using the knockouts on one side. Next, I need to insert 2 of these plastic non-metallic cable connectors. You just simply snap them into your knockout holes, and these secure and protect the wires into the metal box. Let's go try this out now that the box is ready. So it slips in nice, but I'm noticing the drywall is blocking the hole the wire runs through. Here's a shot looking down so you can see what I mean. So let me show you how I'm going to fix that. I just take my utility knife and cut away at the drywall in that area. And I do that for the bottom and top. And just use my hand to clean it up after I make my cuts. Let's test it out and see if it's better. I try it out and it's hard to tell from this shot, but the wire has free access to the cable connector now. I use a level to level the box and mark 3 holes with my pencil. 2 holes are for the Tapcon screws I'll use to secure the box. The other one is so the box's grounding screw has a hole to screw into. Now I don't want the metal box to touch the cement block directly, so I put a piece of waterproof patch and seal tape and cover the back of the box. This will prevent moisture from the cement block to corrode the metal box over time. At least that's my theory. Let me show you what the alternative was to using a shallow metal box. Now, like I showed you in the intro, I could have used my hammer drill, drilling the block perimeter out with a masonry bit, then using my air hammer with a chisel to make a new hole in the block. Then I could have used any old work electrical box. Then to repeat the original installation, cut the drywall to drill a hole in the block to feed the wire through to get to the back of the box. But the wire was surely longer during the original install and now has been cut to size. And I would have more drywall to repair. So it just seemed like too much work and not worth it. So continuing with my plan, I set my drill to hammer and drill the 3 holes I marked earlier. For the grounding screw, I just make a hole deep enough to accept the screw. Next, I punch through and start the 2 Tapcon masonry screws into the tape backing. This will help me find the hole to screw the screws into the cement block. Then I want to just screw the screws in most of the way, just checking everything is ready before attempting to feed the wires through the cable connectors. Once I see it's ready, I unscrew the 2 screws because I need the box free. Let's feed the wires in the box. I bring the bottom wires over to the new cutout and then feed them through the bottom cable connector. Because this wire is brought through the cement block, that's how there's enough length to bring it over to the new receptacle location. So now that the bottom wire is fed through the bottom connector, I next move on to the top wire. After straightening the wires a little more, I feed them into the top cable connector and keep working them, pulling them through little by little. I also have to continue to keep straightening them so they feed through easier. Because the box is just about the same size of the drywall cutout, I know I'm going to have to cut a notch in the drywall to be able to insert the box in the wall. You have to be patient with this and not force the wires. You don't want to damage them during your install. So next I use my jab saw and right where the top wires line up, I cut a small notch in the drywall. And that gives me just enough room to be able to slip the box into the cutout. And once it's in, I can pull the wires to their final position. I cut off a loose piece of the jacket with my scissors and start the 2 Tapcon screws in the box. With one final check with my level, I tighten the screws down tight and the new box is installed and secured. Here's a straight on shot of how it came out. Okay, let's install the receptacle. I just went with this tamper resistant one in black because I needed something not too thick. The ones with the USB port steps would be too large to fit in my shallow box. I need to break off the tab on the hot side of the brass colored terminals. This turns it into a half hot receptacle. So I just use my smaller needle nose pliers and work the tab back and forth until it breaks off. Here's a shot how it looks broken off. Okay, I turned the power back off after I installed the board and batten accent wall. You can learn how I did that on my channel. I'll link the video in the description. I double check the power's off with my voltage detector. Next, I need to pull all the wires back out of the box and straighten them. I had them tucked away with wire connectors capping them off so I can have the lights on in the room while I built the accent wall. I next want to ground the metal electrical box, so I use my needle nose pliers to straighten the bare ground wire. I always start with a step before all the wires are in the way. I already added the green grounding screw that screws directly into the box. The box has threads for this, and remember we pre-drilled the hole in the block to accept it. I just wrap the wire clockwise around the grounding screw, squeeze it tight with my needle nose pliers, then tighten the screw down. I then move the grounding wire out of my way for now. I next use my needle nose pliers to straighten the bare ground wire that goes to that receptacle on that wall to my left that I showed you. Next, I clean up the 2 white neutral wires. I restrip the first neutral wire to the length I want, then loop it around, prepping it for the screw terminal on the receptacle. Then I repeat that for the second neutral wire. I first snip off the end, then strip it to length, then looping the end. Now I have the 2 neutral wires ready. I next clean up one of the hot black wires, snip the end off, and strip it to the length I want. Then I work on the red switched hot wire. I remove the connector, strip it to length, prep the loop, and now that wire is ready. Okay, let's start connecting the prep loop wires. I connect the first neutral wire with the loop facing clockwise, so as I start tightening it, it secures the wire perfectly, and just the bare wires touching the screw terminal. Then I repeat that for the second white neutral wire. You'll see me use a pigtail wire for the black hot wires, but I didn't for these neutrals because I'm trying to use the least amount of wire nuts as possible because of my limited space in these shallow boxes. I next connect the red switch wire that will allow a nightstand lamp to be plugged in and be controlled by a light switch by the bedroom door. I now twist the 2 black wires together using my lineman pliers to twist the ends tightly together. Then, like I mentioned, I'm going to use a pigtail to make my connection to the receptacle. So I wrap the black pigtail wire around the other 2 black wires, and again I use my lineman pliers to twist all 3 wires tight together. Once I feel I got them twisted tightly together, I cut them to size and add a wire nut. Now I just need to loop the other end of the black pigtail wire and make my connection to the other brass color screw on the receptacle. Remember, we removed the tab, so these 2 wires never touch or make a connection. I didn't like how the wire was wrapping around the screw, so I take my small needle nose pliers to squeeze the wire tighter around the screw and then continue tightening the screw down, and now the line and switch wires are secured. The only wire that's left to wire up is the ground wire. So I take the ground wire that comes from the bottom wires that goes to that other receptacle, and I twist it around the other ground wire I used to ground the box. I twist them tighter together with my pliers, then add a green wire nut that has a hole on the top so I can feed the longer ground wire through it. Finally, using my wire strippers and adding an end loop. Now all that's left is attaching it to the receptacle's green ground screw and tightening it down. Next, I bend all the other wires so I can bring the receptacle closer to the box. I waited to attach the ground wire last because it's shorter than the other wires. Then I attach it to the grounding screw. All that's left is to tighten it down. Next, I straighten all the wires up, getting them in the position I want them. Then I back the 2 screws that secure the receptacle to the box out because I want to wrap the receptacle with some electrical tape before I install the receptacle in the box. You do this so the screws can't touch the metal box, or if someone pulls the receptacle out and inadvertently touches them, they don't get zapped. Okay, one last fix of the wires, and I screw the 2 screws back into position now the electrical tape is wrapped. Then I insert the bottom screw into the box and start it, then I repeat that for the top screw. Now before I finish securing the receptacle, I give the wires one final straightening. Liking how it looks, I screw the 2 screws in. Okay, this is the wall plate I'm going to use with these black screws. I need to fit the plate to line up the holes and see if I need to make any adjustments. After a check with my headlamp, I realize I need to loosen the receptacle screws to reposition it. So I loosen the 2 screws, move the receptacle over, and retighten the screws back down, and try the plate again. I realize I need to make holes in the panel here so the plate screws don't hit it. So I mark those 2 holes with my pencil so I can drill the holes. Then I unscrew the receptacle 2 screws so I can move it out of the way, get my drill bit ready in my drill, and drill the 2 holes. After a quick wipe with my finger removing any panel debris, I'm ready to reinstall the receptacle. So I switch from my drill bit back to my Phillips bit, get the screws into position, and screw them mostly in. Like you saw before, the wall plate I'm using has to align with both the receptacle and electrical box, so I have to align the holes before tightening the screws all the way. So after checking my 4 holes are aligned, I go ahead and secure the receptacle by using my Phillips screwdriver by hand. I give the wires one final adjustment and check that I have them where I want them. And now I can finally put the wall plate on and give it a baby wipe to clean it up. What you're going to see me do last is check the wiring to make sure that everything is wired and working correctly. So you can see the lights for the room turn on as I turn the power back on at the breaker. My receptacle tester on that far wall is indicating that there's power and it's wired correctly. And everything looks good on the receptacle that we moved over. Let's next check if the switch wiring is working correctly. Check out the bottom receptacle tester. A lot of my light switches in my house I can control by my Apple Home app. And you can see it turning on and off while the upper tester stays at a constant hot because we removed that tab. So that's it guys, my daughter has the ability to turn on her nightstand lamp but still have something else plugged in if she wants. I hope you enjoyed this video and I gave you a solution if you need to move a receptacle to a shallow wall. Please remember to hit the thumbs up if you like this video, and be sure to subscribe to see more home DIY videos just like this one. Click on any of the links on the screen to check out my other home DIY videos. One, I show you how I installed the accent wall in this room. The other, how I installed a wood closet kit from Lowe's in this room. Thanks again for watching. Bye everyone.